I actually got the opportunity to talk with Ashli Babbitt's mother.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was a short conversation, but we did get some really great information from her. And really interestingly, when I asked her just kind of what she thought about how her daughter's case, if that's what you'd call it, is being handled, she's really disappointed in it. And this is what she had to say. She said, "My daughter was a California constituent, and Nancy Pelosi not only ignored my feelings, she orchestrated the death of my daughter." Now, of course, Nancy Pelosi didn't pull the trigger or anything like that, but she did set up this kind of media narrative to where her daughter's death has been covered, right?
Yeah. That's true. It's always tough talking about, any situation where someone dies. You want to be very respectful, and you also want to give people, like you said, Nancy Pelosi herself did not pull any triggers, and I understand this mother's grief. So to me, it is a bit of a struggle.
Yes.
I get where she's coming from. I 100% do. It is, it's a tragedy. No parent should have to attend their own child's funeral. I think we can all agree on that.
And that's the thing too, is like, if something were to happen to my child or anyone, you want to know who's responsible for your child's death. And
Absolutely.
I think that is completely valid. She went on to say, while I was talking to her, "I've reached out to Nancy Pelosi's office several times. She has yet to call me back because she is too busy playing in her clubhouse with all of her elite people." Which I think, is true. It's not like she doesn't know that Ashli Babbitt's mother is reaching out to her and wants to know what happened to her daughter. I think that she deserves a statement at the very least.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, and honestly, it doesn't take that much effort to pick up a phone. That's like the bare...
Yeah.
Send a text for crying out loud.
I know.
But.
Yeah, she could easily just say, "I'm sorry, we're working on it." Just something, just to give the acknowledgement. And there's the quote on the screen that you just saw. So we also just published an article today about this. I wrote an article and talked about this. And one of the things I highlighted in there is that, at least for right now, we have no reason to believe that Ashli herself was being violent, lighting any of the fires or anything like that to that extent. So from that standpoint, her mother wants to know who's responsible, because there wasn't really that kind of... The lines weren't so blurry as I think the media made it out to be.
Yeah.
So in the age of police accountability and police transparency, why do you think that this is been allowed to go on? Why is no one talking about it?
What do you think, Grant?
Well, to me, I think that is kind of the most striking part about this whole thing. You talked about her quote about Nancy Pelosi orchestrating the death, and we can sit here and debate that all day. I think something that's not up for debate is the hypocrisy of Pelosi and the Democrats and the way that they've responded to this.
Yep.
Just in the way that the people who were in the Capitol, the people who were, as they would put it, insurrectionists. I'm not sure that I would define them as that, but that's what they would say. That's what the establishment media has called them. And so those people are getting so much coverage. It's all we've heard about for the last 6 months. I mean, over and over again, because that is honestly, that's a winning talking point for the left, is that there were rioters. I'm not sure if we define them as rioters or not.
Agitators.
There were people
agitators
in the Capitol building that were not supposed to be there that were supporting Trump. And so that is a talking point that they know that they can get some benefits from. And that's why they focused on it so much. But in the middle of them focusing on all that, they've completely ignored the fact that a woman was killed. And I think that there's...
Potentially by police,
right.
Capitol Police.
And there's I don't see any reason why they wouldn't want to know who did that. And I've heard, I remember when the insurrection first happened, the incursion at the Capitol, and they were talking about, I heard a lot of leftist politicians saying, well, if these had been African-American leftists, that they would have been treated much differently than these white folks, and that a lot more people would have died. I think that's a ridiculous point, but I heard it made a lot of times.
Yep.
And what I would say to those people is, if this had been an African-American who died, it would be all over the news. We would know everything about it. This person would be on trial. There'd be riots, and there'd be burning in the cities and the streets.
Yep.
And this was a white woman who was a Trump supporter, and we're supposed to just brush it under the rug and pretend like we don't care about finding out the facts.
So off that point, Brian, I guess my question is for you. Do you think that the media and how they've portrayed what they're calling the insurrection, do you think that that really contributed to how Ashli's death has been covered?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, look, I don't want to come off like I'm defending it. Like, you just don't storm the Capitol. Like, I feel like that should be common sense advice. Maybe don't do that. So, look, I'm not worried about some of these idiots who've been arrested. But one thing I do worry about is, like you said, the way the media's covered this. They've just vilified everyone involved.
Yes.
So, whether, the mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, what have you, they don't care about the why of why did these agitators storm the Capitol. They don't care about the why. They just care about the who, essentially. And they've broadly labeled all these people Trump supporters. And so, I think the way the media has covered it has absolutely just taken the memory of Ashli Babbitt and kind of, dusted it under the rug. Because the way the media treats this, I mean, look, this is kind of apples to oranges, but just look at the comparison of Michael Floyd versus Ashli Babbitt. Michael Floyd gets like murals and statues.
George Floyd, yeah.
Who's Michael Floyd? That is a former NFL player. Wow. Okay, George Floyd, yes. Michael Floyd is a former Arizona Cardinals receiver. George Floyd has been deified, and again, that is part of the media's coverage. They slovenly, they were slobbering over how great of a guy he was, and just seeing that, seeing the dichotomy of the way the media is like, George Floyd. I keep wanting to say Michael Floyd, George Floyd, and then the way the media is like, Ashli Babbitt, she's just one of those crazy Trump kooks, like who stormed the Capitol, whatever. Like,
yeah.
I mean, that's essentially the narrative the media has peddled, and sadly, it is the narrative that has probably taken the most hold as far as like anything revolving around January 6th goes.